So the special effect, there is Sophie, who is the head of production that I work with on Lucy, and then we have a couple of names, and then I met this guy called Scott, and the first thing is to see his reaction when he read the script, because if you're the supervisor of special effect and you read the script, there is only three solutions. The first one, you die from a heart attack. The second one, you run. And the third one, you have a big smile and then you start sweating and say, oh my God, it's great, but I don't know if I can do it. And it was basically Scott was in the third position and he said, it's insane. And he started to scratch his head and say, oh my God, but how can, and he was working already after 10 minutes. And I love that, and I love this energy, and he's very pragmatic and very well organized.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's amazing. I feel like I kind of jumped on a train already going 400 miles an hour when I joined, and or maybe a spaceship is a better analogy. But I feel like Sophie and Luc and the previous people that you've been working with kind of had already worked with companies like Halon doing pre-visualization and Rodeo doing pre-visualization. So Luc basically was already sort of bringing life to his storyboards. And I feel like those early days, he was basically already cutting the movie in his head. And he did that kind of by filling in some of the gaps through some 3D work and then storyboards for other things. So
we start by taking the storyboard and make a kind of every shots, how long, how many species of aliens inside, how many aliens in it, how long is the shot, what is the movement, and then to put a price on each of them, so more than 2,000. And then we talk about, companies who can do it. And the two best in the world are Weta and ILM.
For ILM, it made sense to give them this great self-contained world of the big market, which is half in virtual space and half in a desert, and it goes back and pieces go back and forth. So in a weird way, it took me so long to wrap my head around the conceptuals of that. We discussed like really dedicating kind of one visual effects supervisor and team at ILM to just handling that whole bit.
So when we beat the sequence, when we looked at the sequence, it was very exciting and very scary at the same time. It's a sequence that has a lot of different aliens, so there's a lot of characters to build, which is great because you want to have so much, you want to create this, you want to create that, but it's very difficult because it's a lot of work. But also the environment, it's going to be a CG environment, but it's not an empty environment, it's a bazaar. It's this major market, which means there is tons of things everywhere, and it has to be fully realistic because you cut from that environment to the interior of a store, which was shot on set, or another sequence, or the interior of the intruder that is shot on set. And so it's not a fully feature animated movie, it's really a real action movie. So we have to be perfect, and it's a tremendous amount of work. So it's exciting and it's scary.
This is pretty much the opening scene of the film, and very much it's defining Valerian and Laureline's characters and their relationship, or the status of their relationship at the time. But the marketplace specifically that they go to does not exist. And so, amongst other things, adding creatures, etc., but our primary task in this movie is going to be developing this massive environment and then populating it with a whole bunch of very, very strange creatures. So we've shot stages here that have been entire sets that have been built, and then we were doing creatures in there. And we've had other sets that were just blue, entirely blue. And so we, of course, try and implement robust technologies and methodologies that are also very easy and facile for the filmmakers. So if Luc changes his mind, which is which happens, all directors do, we can adapt really quickly on set.
On Valerian, we receive the scripts, we go through the scripts, and we define what type of shots that might be. Scott, who is the VFX supervisor on this movie on the EuropaCorp side, has already done a breakdown, or we received a breakdown, which means that per sequence it will say, okay, we want these shots, there's these shots happening, this is what we think is going to be in the shot, all this kind of aspect. So the first pass is to define, okay, what does that mean? What kind of work has to be done on a per shot basis? And this is a prep. And then there is some artwork that is done. Luc is using a lot of artists as well, and so he provided a lot of artwork so we could see what the characters looks like, what the environment might look like. He gave us a lot of ideas as well. Then when you reach to the point of the shoots, you also define how to shoot the shot, meaning what kind of element do you need to get the final frame. And sometimes it's saying, okay, it's over blue screen, but what do you place on the blue screen? It could be that you need markers, you need these kind of aspects. It could be that you say, okay, we're going to shoot this shot using different plates. So something for the background, something for the foreground. So our job, our work on set is to define that we're shooting in the proper way to be sure that we have everything that we need to do the work afterwards.
We haven't done anything like necessarily like groundbreakingly out of left field for this show. It's really been about bringing together the handful of technologies that we've honed on numerous other projects, and then really, again, making sure that we do our best with them within how Luc's shooting style, which is, again, it's very fast. He's very, very fast. By him both being the director and the camera operator, which is very rare, he's making decisions on the fly. And again, it's very high, it's high energy and fun. But for us, the technology and the approach that we had on this show is fairly tried and true to the ILM pipeline, which has been very interesting working right alongside Weta, who does things slightly differently. And again, we play to our tools. We have proprietary tools and methods that we have, and then we want to maximize those. So we approach things slightly differently. And that's certainly not better or worse, it's just what has been done and what's worked for us.
It's very interesting on this movie where multiple companies working, and depending of the characters that are in this movie, the methodology is slightly different. For example, in our sequence, we have a character called Igon Cyrus, and the way we shot him, we have an actor, and the actor has our mocap suits that is very particular to ILM with patterns on it, and that helps us to track his movements. And we're going to shoot it with witness cameras, mainly, the main camera and witness cameras. And the reason we're using those witness cameras is to do some, what we call stereogrammetry, which means we're going to get his position or the position of those points in space by using multiple images taken at the same time. Some other possibilities are, and in that case, as equipment, what we're using is cameras, right? And then what we tend to look at as well is where is the camera, so we want to know the distance, so we have tools to take the distance. We want to place on set some markers so that we are aware, especially on blue screens, so we might use poles with markers or just tape that we tape on the blue screen.
So the idea here is that we're doing a grid of targets, but as you see, each one is slightly different. We can even have two targets next to each other that are even the same, but from a distance, as you look up there, each one is totally unique. So later on, we take photographs and we reconstruct where the targets are, and it's very easy for the artists in post-production to recognize the green over there versus the orange, or just the different shapes. That way we understand which target is which.
So on this show, there is some other creatures that, for example, will be completely motion captured. In that case, you have those very specific cameras that are placed all around and it's the same idea, but instead of using frames, you're using a signal that is different, that will interactively take the movement of the character. And so this is a costume, and we're using all those little targets and all these little designs so the software can track them. And we're going to get his movements. And once we have his movement, we're going to replace him entirely by an alien. Why do you use one method compared to another one is really also depending of if the character that you're representing is fairly human or the same sort of shapes. It can be also the fact that if you need more equipment, which sometimes gives you a better information, you need also more equipment and more people on set, and so it's a little bit more intrusive. So depending of the sequence and depending of what you have to do, you choose the equipment that you're going to use.
In fact, the first discussion I have with the three company with ILM, Weta, and then Rodeo is I want to be able to film the story like if it's two cops in a street of New York doing an investigation. I don't want to hear about the blue screen or thing. I am watching everything. I'm seeing the spaceship, I'm seeing the space station, I'm seeing the alien, I see everything. So I can take my camera on my shoulder and I know exactly the size of the alien. You know, I see them. And what was interesting is I have to explain a lot before we shoot what I'm seeing. And I try to explain everything, you know, in the dimension. And it was funny sometimes with a blue screen, and I explained for 10 minutes exactly, and people say, oh, and they take notes, you know, like if they're watching the thing. So we look like a bunch of cuckoos, but it was the only way. I don't want to be the slave of the technique. I want to be free to tell my story, and I want them to follow me. And they were amazing for that because they never wait for anything. They never oblige me to do a certain way. I have a couple of rules, like there's a big line, like a square, and the people with, you know, gray suit and dots, they can't get out of the square, otherwise they can't capture them. But basically, we have 80 cameras on the roof, and 20 people on computer on the back. And every time I do a shot, they were recording everything. After a moment, you know, like the camera was always on the actors, but suddenly I see like two cameras on me. And I said, why you put the camera on me? He said, because when you shoot, when you explain, when you talk to the actor, you do a couple of movement and expression that we want to catch in case. So they were even recording me sometime to get some information.
And then we also met early with Weta, and I think, you know, Joe Leterre even met with the team before I came on to just wrap their head around the kind of emotional core of the movie, which are the pearls.
I'm always impressed with what Weta has created on Avatar, on Planet of the Apes, on The Lord of the Rings. I mean, all those characters seem so real. And if Valerian, the movie, was going to work out, it's because all those creatures we have created would look real. Because it's one thing to have great designs, but it's another thing to have them look amazingly. And so we reached out to them, and we presented we showed them all the designs we had, and Luc explained his vision, and they were so excited. And on the other side, us, it was like, wow, Weta, they're excited about our film. And it really, I mean, you feel that you're just in the hands of the top.
Break down the film with Luc happened, you know, pretty early on once I'd read the script and started to really think about how we would put this all together. Obviously, by that point, he had done quite a lot of the thinking himself. So he had the designs, he had the artwork, he had most of that in place. What we tried to work around was this idea of virtual production, how we overlay the digital world that we need to create with the live action shooting. So in order to start that, actually, we asked Luc if he would just come down and spend a couple of weeks with us at Weta, which turned into a shorter period than that because we managed to get through it pretty quickly. Luc works pretty fast. But it was great to just show him how we would set something up and to understand the tools in creating a virtual world and how that works with his style. So we got a chance to really think about how that would translate to what we were doing here on set.
We have very photoreal humanoid creatures, the pearls, which are going to be motion capture and basically anything that the closer it gets to human, the more we really try and follow the actor that's performing it out.
So Weta has installed all these cameras all over set to basically capture the action of our pearl actors. And what it does is, with all the coverage of all the different cameras, they're able to extract the motion of the bodies, and then we're going to have them transfer that to our CG characters. So it's kind of a newish thing to do motion capture live on set, and Weta's really been perfecting that art over the last couple of years, and we're benefiting from all their work here.
So for those guys, we'll be very one-to-one with what the actors were doing, and they gave great performances. So it falls on us to just match that as best we can. And you know, frame by frame, we're looking at what their faces are doing.
So far, the most challenging thing that we've had to do is the designs of the pearls themselves, because Luc had this interesting concept of trying to make their skin come alive, to have a vibrancy to it, using this idea of chromatophores, which is what you see in certain squids, for example, where they can change based on a response to their environment. And Luc thought that would be something really interesting to use to enhance their performance. So that's been the most interesting thing for us, because that happens at a layer underneath the skin, but it affects what you see visually. So it gives it a really rich luster to the skin.
When you get to something like the Dugan doggies, they're also, I mean, they stand on two legs like humans, but they're not human enough for us to actually use motion capture. There's a certain cartoonish element to them, or an exaggerated element to them, so we can go in and take liberties with the motion. So in that case, we would, but there's actors that Luc's shooting as he's doing the scene, the three actors that are mouthing the roles for the Dugan doggies. So we will look at them for reference, and we will capture or copy a lot of their hand motions. Definitely anything that we can read in the emotions of their face, we'll try and capture that into the Doogie Doggy's face. But of course, their faces are so different that we'll have to play around with different ideas on what we can do for that.
Ring any bells?
A highly sensitive matter.
The best person to speak to
Would be Major Sam.
We need to talk.
I think one of the biggest challenges that we have in the film is the character of Bubble. I mean, what is Bubble? I mean, Bubble's played by Rihanna, and obviously that's, it's a really strong character, and she performs so well on stage, during all the scenes, and we want to keep, like with all the actors that we have playing characters, we want to keep as much of her personality in the character of Bubble. But Bubble can also envelop other characters and turn into other characters, and in the fights with the Bulan can kind of twist and pull herself apart and reform, and this big amorphous blobby mass of stuff. So the big challenge for us is to make this a really exciting character to watch, but also make it believably that she can exist in all these different states. So she can be this sort of amorphous creature that can slide through grates and avoid swords by kind of bending a whole body, and run as a kind of blobby rolling mess, but then also kind of reform into this sort of normal form of Bubble that has some elements of Rihanna's performance and has her dialogue spoken, and we can still read Rihanna in there. And then also, compellingly, change from that into Ethan Hawke or into Dane or into Rihanna herself, and still keep that sort of consistent character. And there's a lot of fun things there, you know, like when Ethan leaves the club as Bubble, containing Dane inside of her.
Okay, Bubble, get out of me.
All right, I'm doing this. Good. Very good.
There's a little bit of dialogue where, you know, Ethan speaks with Rihanna's voice and then goes and lowers her voice as she's getting into character. And there's this really nice sort of ongoing thing that whenever Rihanna or Bubble transforms into a new character, you know, it takes her a little while to work it out and to work out how to be that character, to learn how to act in that way. And one of the really nice things that we're working on at the moment is when Rihanna first, or Bubble, I should say, forms into a Boulan for the first time.
Oh, no. I've never played a Boulan Bator before.
What? Are you an artist or not?
Yes, but I need time to get into my role and capture my movements and behaviors and character's arc. I do a couple rehearsals. You gave me my notes.
Well, a little improv never hurt anyone. Let's go.
All right. Turn around. Turn around.
The Boulans are sort of big and they're heavy. They're their own challenge in terms of animation. You know, they have this sort of wobble to them. And as the Bubble character is quite kind of wobbly anyway, she's kind of overdoing it and is walking almost like a little drunk. And at the same time, she's also kind of, you know, she's checking her nails out and, you know, in Boulan form, thinking, oh, that's not so great. So the idea of, you know, making sure that we still keep, you know, what Rihanna put into the character of Bubble through all these different stages is just a huge challenge.
So at Weta, we're starting to work now on getting some of the shots in that Luc has completed and finishing the character designs, turning them into three-dimensional versions of the characters from the artwork, and starting to put them through their paces of performance, testing their performance, understanding how they're going to move physically, how their bodies are going to move, how we'll translate the motion capture that was done on set into something, you know, alien. For example, in the case of the Boulan, they have a certain stylized way of working, or in the case of the pearls, it's different. It's more of a beautiful, elegant movement. And we need to carry that through then to their facial performances, to the dialogue, and really understanding all that. So we're in those early stages of really locking down what the characters are going to be.
And there's a third company you write called Rodeo. Rodeo, I work with them also on Lucy on the chase, the car chase. Very good, and we specifically give them all the spaceship, the space station, everything mechanical. Not with characters, but just the mechanical, to separate that.
I kind of feel like it really settled into a nice, organic, kind of logical way where the movie settled out, and many discussions happened, but Rodeo was already engaged in doing a bunch of amazing conceptual work, and it made perfect sense for them to be doing the space work and environment. They're so well known for beautiful environmental work, so it made logical sense to have them do a lot of the Alpha space station.
Rodeo is amazing for matte paintings and backgrounds. They're really a very solid company for digital environments. And I had worked before with François Dumoulin, who is the supervisor there at Rodeo, and Marie-Cécile Down, who is the producer for them, and they've done incredible work on Lucy, so they already had a relationship, you know, also with Luc. So, I mean, it seemed like an obvious choice for all the space shots and everything that's in space. And so basically it was a very nice way of looking at that breakdown where all the space shot and CG, full CG environments done by Rodeo, and the big market by ILM, and basically the rest of the movie by Weta, which is a huge chunk of the movie.
And I also feel like these great visual effects companies are so well lined up from previous things they've done, but you also kind of want to push them a little bit and get them, like, the best artists to do their best work at the company. So I feel like for Rodeo, they're known for beautiful environmental things, but they're also pushing their animation team to do flying spaceship things that are, I think, incredible.
Yeah, amazing.
And I think, you know, ILM is such a legacy of amazing things, and that's why we felt super comfortable having them do this kind of quirky sequence that's a little like motion graphics mixed with animation and environment. So it's kind of like a melting pot of all these things in this big stew that's a unique stew.
C'est une séquence de poursuite très compliquée parce qu'elle se déroule dans Alpha et qu'Alpha c'est un environnement très composite. Donc la séquence commence avec le vaisseau des Pearls qui est à l'extérieur d'Alpha. Valerian engage la poursuite avec l'Intruder. On a toute une série de shots où on est à l'extérieur d'Alpha. Le Pearl Ship rentre dans un tunnel, l'Intruder part à sa suite. Puis là, on rentre dans des espaces de plus en plus confinés. Et on traverse, je pense, 5 ou 6 endroits différents d'Alpha, de plus en plus petits, jusqu'à ce que l'Intruder puisse plus passer. Valerian doit prendre le Skyjet, qui est comme une espèce de petite moto de l'espace, pour continuer à poursuivre le Pearl Ship, jusqu'à ce qu'il se retrouve dans la zone interdite d'Alpha, qui est le territoire des Boulanes. Donc là, on est en train de préparer la scène du Skyjet. C'est une des très grosses scènes que fabrique Rodeo. Donc le Skyjet qu'on voit derrière moi, c'est celui qui a été fabriqué par le Art Department. Et nous, on est chargé de faire une réplique numérique, vraiment un pour un de cet objet. Là, on va tourner Valerian qui rentre dans le Skyjet, les trappes vont s'ouvrir. Nous, on va animer le Skyjet qui va sortir de l'Intruder. Puis ensuite, on a toute une série de shots où ce Skyjet va être 100% numérique et vraiment identique à ce que vous voyez là sur le plateau. Tout ce qu'on va filmer pour ces trucs-là, c'est Dane sur un fond bleu qui va prétendre être dans le Skyjet. Puis nous, on va le mettre dans notre Skyjet CG. On a toute une scène de poursuite qui est vraiment compliquée avec ce Skyjet. Les shots, enfin les plans dont on est en charge à Rodeo sont des shots qui sont pour la plupart 90% numériques. Il n'y a presque rien de tourné. Il y a très peu de décors avec lesquels on connecte directement. Bon, il y a le plateau de l'Intruder qu'on est en train de faire. Il y a le petit bout de Skyjet qu'on a tourné, mais on ne peut pas vraiment parler de décor. Disons que l'implication de Rodeo sur la création visuelle de ces environnements est tellement énorme que finalement notre interaction avec l'équipe de production designer, le Art Department, est assez limitée. Je pense que de toute façon, et ça c'est quelque chose que je sais de mon expérience passée avec Luc sur Lucy, Luc il a son film au complet dans la tête quand il le prépare, et ce qui tourne c'est exactement ce qu'il a dans la tête, et ce qu'il y a dans l'image finie, que ce soit numérique ou que ce soit un décor construit, c'est rigoureusement ce qu'il a dans la tête. Il y a des réalisateurs qui ont besoin de passer par des processus un peu plus organiques ou avec des itérations, puis ils vont essayer différentes pistes. Luc, pas du tout, c'est une vraie ligne droite. Et je l'avais vécu sur Lucy, où que ce soit les concepts pour préparer les décors, ou que ce soit les concepts pour tout ce qui était complètement numérique. Entre le concept, ce qui est tourné, ce qui est construit, puis ce qui est fait en numérique, c'est une ligne droite, c'est vraiment... Il n'y a pas de surprise. Ce qui pour nous est hyper agréable, parce que les effets visuels, ça marche un petit peu comme construire un décor. Il faut que tu commences par faire ton plan, puis tu montes les murs, puis tu fais la patine sur les murs, puis tu installes les accessoires. Et si tu es rendu au moment de mettre les accessoires, puis qu'on te dit « Ah ben non, finalement, j'aimerais bien pousser ce mur-là », c'est pas très drôle, parce que tu démontes le mur, tu en construis un nouveau, puis tu repenses tout. Alors que Luc, il a son plan et il dit « C'est ça que je veux ». C'est sûr que même après tous les films qu'il a fait, je pense que c'est le plus gros film d'effets visuels que Luc ait jamais fait. Celui-là, c'est un des plus gros projets d'effets visuels de toute façon qui ait jamais été fait. C'est vraiment massif, mais c'est vraiment impressionnant de voir à quel point, entre la vignette du storyboard, puis ce qui est fait en prévise, puis ce qui est construit sur le set, puis ce qu'on va demander de faire en effet visuel, c'est tout sur la même ligne.
What we're doing in this movie is, like, for visual effects, you're most privileged to be able to do, like, world creation and the inhabitants of that world, and we actually have a universe creation. We've got multiple worlds that have their own flavor, and we've got multiple inhabitants of those worlds, and just like all these incredible designs and characters. And so every company dealing with their own worlds is a challenge, and then we have to just make sure all those worlds fit together in a universe, you know? And that, for me, one of the amazing things is, like, you can look at so many pieces of this movie and watch 30 seconds of it, and it immediately, to me, it's Luc's, like, it's his style, it has his signature all over it. And so we definitely want to have that cohesive over the whole movie. We wanted to feel every piece to feel like Luc's movie and Luc's world and Luc's world and Luc's universe. A universe basically inspired by the original Valerian material, but it's definitely got Luc's twist on it.